Hi everyone, I'm Alessandro Pagliero, and today I will talk to you how we use the generative models without large language models to perform product development augmented by AI. I am a senior machine learning engineer, and I work for Thoughtworks at the Dutch office in Amsterdam. Thoughtworks is a global consulting company pioneering in the agile software development and working at the intersection between design, tech, and strategy. So applied data science as a natural fit in all this. It's a company with approximately 11,000 employees distributed in 18 different offices. And this year has been turning 30 years old. In the picture, there is me with some colleagues in the Amsterdam office, and our office in these old buildings with a little tower. Curious fact, this building was created in 1872, and it hosted the first farm factory in the Netherlands. So again, product development. Let's start with an introduction about generative models as an overview. Generative models are a probabilistic model that can be used to as a way to create new data. You have some training data, you train a generative model, you sample from it, and here you go, you have new data. They have been developed since many decades. If you think about hidden Markov model or Gaussian mixture models. And there are several reasons why they are important. You can run simulations with them. I read they are used at CERN to simulate events for physics phenomenon happening in LHC collider. They are used to foster scientific discovery, for example, development of new drugs, chemicals, or new materials. There are plenty of applications for what concerns computer vision and NLP, so generation of new text and images, text-to-image, image denoising, or image compression. And last but not least, with generative models, you can generate new products, such as food and drinks. And this is what I will be focusing about in the rest of the presentation. This is the Intelligence, the world's first AI-generated whiskey. And this is how we started our journey with AI product development back in 2019, so way before I joined the company. And we have chosen it because it's a very representative example of what you can do with generative models. It's a story of whiskey distillery, a Swedish whiskey distillery, Mackmyra, which is located 200 kilometers north of Stockholm. And in occasion of their 20th anniversary, they wanted to do something special. So they reached out to us, and we accepted the challenge of supporting them in creating a new special recipe. So we use generative models fed with internal grades, consumer ratings, awards received. And with all this data, we were able to optimize the recipe generated. Some of the recipes were shortlisted, and at some point, the master blended selected one of those, and here is the result, which has been bottled. It has been successful result because the first batch sold out in one day, and also from consumers' reviews, the AI whiskey scored way beyond the average for a whiskey base. But you might think that this is biased ratings because it's such a different product from the rest. However, in 2020, the Intelligence won first prize in a blind-tested industry competition. So it was clear that this was not only a success for the use of AI, but also in terms of taste. So after this introduction on generative models and a use case, let's make a step back and dig on the background of the product development. In order to apply AI for product development, it's essential that we understand how what's the work of the product developers about and which are the pain points. So the core tasks of product developers are essentially three. They might need to either create new recipes, so novelty, or change ingredients of an existing recipe. You can imagine you cannot use anymore a certain product, or there is some other type of change that you might want to apply to the formulation. And or the third task is that there might be a necessity to improve an already existing product. The challenges are that a lot of prototypes are produced, but out of those few are viable, so there is a low success rate. It is not always objective to choose out of all the prototypes which one to promote for production. And from the point of view of the data, there can be flaws in the way they are structured, because essentially there is not a structure, or they might be scattered in different places, so they are not collected just in one place. Last but not least, it takes time and efforts to upskill product developers because there is a lot of difference between junior and senior in terms of skills. It is also important to have a clear understanding of how the product development flow is structured. Everything starts with a idea coming, for example, from marketing informations, from social, and then people from different departments gather and think about the concept of the product, the consumer target group. So at this point, the true development process can start. And this is a core phase which is characterized by a high degree of experimentation because every prototype that is produced has to be tested by a panel across several round tables. There might be several interactions with the entities which are producing the ingredients. So it's the most, definitely the most complex process. Once a viable product, a viable recipe is reached, this candidate is promoted to the last stage of consumer testing, and then the product can be produced and commercialized. So this section in rose color is the one that can be augmented by AI. So we get to the point of really questioning how generative methods can be used to support product development. And the answer is that they can optimize the recipe so that the AI can be used as a sort of R&D assistant. And the design can be is showed in this diagram. So everything starts with the product developer, which is setting, for example, constraints on the ingredients or certain target to optimize. And then the generative model is starting to generate new recipes. The product developer will extract some of them out of a short list and literally produce samples that are tested by humans. This feedback, this scored recipe, are being used to feed the generative model, which is going to learn from these scores and with a explore exploit strategy is going to generate new recipes. So there is this iterative process where the generative models are combined to a feedback loop, and the generative models are used are sort of a gun. So there is a tandem of model which are interacting with each other. One model is generating new recipes, and the other model is rating this recipe. There are a certain number of iterations, and at some point, when there is no further improvement, the model generates a list which is used by the product developer to choose the candidates to produce. But it's not everything. A very important trait of the AI augmented product development is the fact that this is an augmentation and not a replacement of experts. So the product developers, the expert in this specific case, are those who will literally manage and inject, use their expertise to get the best out of the generative models. They will check the results. They might also participate in testing the recipe themselves. So it's really a combination of human expertise augmented with statistical learning superpowers. How is this approach perceived? This is an example of feedback from the master blender of McMurra, which stated, we see AI as a part of our digital development, and it's really exciting to let AI be a complement to the craft of producing a high quality whiskey. So it's a perfect way to leverage, as said, the human expertise together with capabilities produced by new technologies. Human expertise, which is really specialized. I was surprised by the title, but actually chief nose officer as a meaning and importance in this context, because this type of development does not only require to have a background in a specialized discipline such as biology or nutrition, but also a very well-developed olfactory sense. So we talked about the generative models from a very general perspective, about the product development and the approach that we have used to combine AI with product development. And now it's the moment to talk more in details about the benefits and the aspects to consider in order to be successful in adopting this approach. Benefits are can be over different types of angles. Benefits in terms of the techniques, benefits in terms of the usage, and benefits in terms of the process. From the point of view of the technique, a peculiarity of this approach is that it can learn from small data. It can also learn from no data, because sometimes it happens that when we start an engagement with a client, there are no usable data. So some of the first iteration has to be used to calibrate, initialize the system. Second benefit is that it has a very efficient way of experimenting and exploring compared to traditional methods such as design of experiment, which means that there are tangible business outcomes because you can bring a large amount of products to the market faster. And when I say exploration, I mean that there is this very large design or search space composed by tens of ingredients, sensory attributes, and it's a very challenging task to navigate and optimize through this big space. From a human perspective, this is an approach with a human in the loop, so that the product developers or the expert of the specific fields are on the drive seat. They are the one managing this system. They are not in a passive position. This approach fostered the collective knowledge sharing among the experts, so that it is easier to upskill more junior team members, and also helps in having a more structured process to harmonize the data and collect them in just one place. So benefits are not only on the output of the recipe, but can also be on the way of working, on the process itself. From a system perspective, a very big point of this approach is that is not a point solution, but is something that can be reused to develop different types of products, and can be easily scaled because the system design is rather simple. And last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, the product developers have to deal with a very large space, ingredients, sensory attributes, maybe multiple parameters to optimize. Think about consumer liking or cost or other parameters. So it removes from them the hard task to manage this complexity. There are, although, aspects to consider to be successful with the adoption of this technique. The first one is that the feedback loop need to be thought in terms of the time it takes to get feedback from testing panel of experts or from laboratory instruments. And also, it's important to consider how much every one of these measures costs, so that these can adapt the available time and money budget from the company that wants to pursue this type of development. And also, the dimensionality of the problem is an aspect to be careful about, because intuitively you can understand that the larger the amount of dimensions, the more the time it will take to get to a viable product, and the more the time it will take to for the generative algorithm to return an output. Now, let's try to abstract away from the specific use case that I mentioned of the food and drink industry, and let's think if there is some other way we could use this approach for product development. So not only for optimizing a recipe and receiving measurements from as I said, testing panel or from laboratory instruments, but we could think to use it and to extend it to develop a generic kind of product. It might be optimizing drugs, chemicals, or new materials, so that instead of a recipe, we think about formulation. So an ensemble of components and the feedback generated by whatever the specific laboratory or industry can use to provide an evaluation. So again, it could be people or instruments from a laboratory. And we reached the point where we can summarize what we have seen so far. So generative models are very useful because they can be used as a tool to simulate new data. They can be used to solve a real-world problem, complex problem, such as development of whiskey, or you can see in our website example of how we optimize the taste of Oreo cookies. They can also complement and enhance the expert capabilities. So they are not used as a replacement, but as an additional tool that can support the experts. And there are potential to generalize and extend the way AI is augmented product development. Thanks for listening.